Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to writing the admission essay. My name is Carrie Pratt. I'm a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions here at the University of Vermont. Really happy that you were able to spend some time on our campus today. I chatted with some of you at my UVM table, switching hats to kind of a broader presentation for you now, but we will have opportunities to have questions at the end, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about my presentation, and then I will be available afterwards should you have any questions that you might want to ask a little bit more privately. So I'll introduce myself. I am a born and bred Vermonter. I went to my very own college and career pathways in 2004. And so I remember being in your shoes many years ago and not necessarily knowing what I was getting myself into with this whole college process. I did end up, I graduated from Essex High School back in 2005, and then I made my way to St. Mike's where I got an undergraduate degree in English in 2009. I also got a master's degree while I was working here at UVM in education, and I have spent a number of years working in higher ed, pretty much my entire career. I've worked in career prep and then mostly in undergraduate admissions. I've read many thousands of college admissions essays, so I do feel like I'm qualified to share this information with you. I also recruit students from the state of Michigan and work with our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences to provide admissions support. And I graduated from a College Board Enrollment Leadership Academy. But also I'm a lot of other things besides all of that. So I'm a group fitness instructor. I've been teaching here at UVM for many years. I also am an animal lover. I volunteer at the Chittenden County Humane Society every Sunday morning with cats and small animals. I'm part of a bicultural family. My husband's from Cyprus, and so we have family all over the world, including a beloved niece and nephew, one in England and one here in Vermont. I have 3 cats, Achilles, Thor, and Rocky. Rocky named after Project Hail Mary, so I'm very excited to go see the movie, Project Hail Mary. And I spend time playing a lot of pickleball here on campus with, I have actually seen a couple of my pickleball friends here at College and Career Pathways. All right, so a lot of intro, not really about the college essay. Why am I telling you all of this? I want you to think about these two sort of disparate types of introductions as my application to you versus my essay. So my application, I'm telling you my statistics. I went here, I have this degree, I have that degree, et cetera, et cetera. I graduated from this, I do this work, make myself sound good, make myself sound like, you can trust me, I've read 5,000 essays, et cetera. But my essay to you is that I'm really a multidimensional person. This is just my job. I have a lot of other things that I do outside of work. I have, of course, Vermont Green tickets. I'm super into pickleball. I'm into sports and things like that. So really, it's sort of two parts of the same person that really together, you need both of them in order to make a really good understanding of who I am. I could have just given you the second slide and you would have been like, who is this schmo? Or I could have given you just the first slide and you'd been like, boring. So both of those parts are really needed in order for a college application to be complete, in my opinion. So we're going to talk about what is the Common App essay. Know that I will be using the terms Common Application essay, but I mean the main essay of whatever application you're filling out. So if you're filling out the coalition application or you're filling out an independent sort of private application for a school, I'm speaking broadly in those terms. Most people, many people, will fill out the Common Application at least. And so you'll see the topics and we'll talk sort of broadly about the Common App. We'll talk about how the essay is viewed, what it is, what it isn't, opportunities to think about picking a topic, how you're going to write it. We'll talk about supplemental essays, which is something that you'll probably see as well. We'll talk about some ethical concerns that we run into when we're thinking about submitting writing as a part of our college application, and I'll leave time for questions as well. So what is the Common Application essay? It is a mandatory part of the Common App. There are 7 prompts. I will show them to you in a moment. They're available online, not a secret. It's 650 words maximum, so it's not massive, but it is definitely longer than a paragraph. It is something that you want to kind of treat with some formality to it. It does go to all of the colleges that you apply to on the Common Application. So if you're filling out an independent application, UVM doesn't have one, but let's say you were applying to a school that did have just their own application, you would have it just go to that school. But the Common App, you're applying to 7 schools. This essay is going to go to all 7 schools. Different than the supplemental essays, which we'll talk about towards the end, which would only go to that school that has asked you that specific question. So what is the essay? The essay is an opportunity for you to share a little bit more about who you are as a person. So if you think about the topics and the pieces of the application that I have already, I have your sort of biographical information, what high school do you go to, I have information about what major you might be interested in. That's all kind of a part of your actual common application. Then I have your transcript, which has your classes on it and the grades that you've gotten. If you're applying to a school that accepts or requires standardized test scores, I may have those in front of me. Letter of recommendation or more than one, and then also extracurriculars. And so on top of those, this essay is kind of like a piece of that puzzle of what you're submitting. It is an opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about beyond the numbers, beyond those pieces that I've already seen of yours. It's an opportunity to tell your story, or a part of your story, possibly. And it is an opportunity for me to get a sense of what's important to you. And so, no, it does not have to be your passion and, the biggest thing in your life, but it is something that your application wouldn't be complete if this wasn't included. Some sort of element of exploration of this topic would be important to include in your application. Things that the essay is not. It is not an opportunity for you to talk about your high grades. I've already seen those as a part of your transcripts. You don't need to rehash that. You also don't need to list your extracurricular activities. I've already seen those. You might write about one, but you don't have to write about all of them. You can trust that the other pieces of the application that you've submitted have already been viewed, and so this is meant to be something separate. It's also not a recycled essay from your English class. Now, if you're taking a class where writing a college essay is part of the curriculum, then that's fine. But it's not like you doing a literary analysis. It's not a writing sample where you would just take a piece of writing that you've done and then just submit it. It's really meant to be a little bit more exploratory and personalized than that. And then it's also not your entire life story, because you really couldn't include your entire life story in a 650-word essay. So take that pressure off of yourself. This is not the only lens that I'm getting in to see who you are as a person. I'm seeing lots of other things, but this is just an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper and to a part, let's say, of that story of yourself. So of course, we never want to just trust one source. We want to listen to different sources. So I've got two quotes here. So one from the National Association of College Admission Counseling. Ask your friends what they're writing and then don't write that. So yes, we have some very common topics that are covered a lot. We can talk about what some of those are. But I would suggest that if you're thinking you're going to write about X event or Y sports game, and everybody else on your team or that participated in the event is also planning on writing about that, maybe we'd want to kind of stray away from that topic. And then the Princeton Review says, the best way to tell your story is to write a personal, thoughtful essay about something that has meaning for you. Be honest and genuine, and your unique qualities will show through. I really like the idea of being honest and being genuine. I think a lot of times people think about the college essay as an opportunity or an invitation or a requirement to be something that they're not. They feel they need to change their words or they need to change their experiences, and that's simply not true. I don't have any interest in reading something that's untrue or inauthentic to you. I have an interest in reading what is true and authentic to you, and I have an interest in reading your story. So those are kind of some other thoughts about the college essay. So I'm going to talk about two different sort of ways of approaching this. One is going to be to take a look at the prompts, the questions that the Common App asks, pick one, and then try to think of what to write. Now, there's a reason I didn't put the prompts on the screen until a little bit later, because I want you to actually sit there and think about what you might want to write about, what topic might you want to write about. The prompts are broad enough that you could really fit just about any topic into just about any one of the prompts, and it could work. So that's why I want you to really think about what topic or topics might I consider writing about? So for example, a good topic is one that you're excited to write about. And there might be some folks in the audience saying, that's impossible, I'm not going to be excited about it. Well, venture on a guess at what you could be excited about writing. Or if you are a writer, as I am, and as I'm sure many of you are as well, yeah, I could get excited about writing something about the way that volunteering at the Humane Society has really impacted my life. I could get excited about that. So that's where I want you to think about focusing your energy and your time when you're thinking about a topic. Also thinking about key moments. What's important to you? What do you want the reader to know about you that they're not going to see in another part of the application? And like I said a moment ago, what is your application incomplete without? And so I hope for the students in the room that you've got a few little ideas going on in the brain that might fit some of these ideas. So for example, it's not the fact that you're taking pre-calc, it's not the fact that you took biology, it's not the fact that you did this extracurricular activity, which really didn't have a whole lot of meaning to you. But it's the other stuff that maybe doesn't show up. Could be a job, could be a family situation, it could be any number of different things. There's not ever a right or a wrong, good or bad. So then you think about, let's say you've got 2 or 3 different ideas, topics that you might want to write about. And then we're going to take a look at the prompts. So as I said, there are 7 questions for the Common App. Similarly, for lots of other applications, if you find yourself filling out one, I can almost guarantee you that there will always be one that is right about a topic of your choice. So you really have the world open to you about what you might write about. And so which prompt, as you're thinking in the back of your mind about these topics you might like to write about, which prompt is going to be the best vehicle for you to tell that story? So like I said, this is not about just sort of sitting down and spewing out a bunch of words in life story format. This is about finding a way in to whatever topic it is that you really want to write about. So which prompt will help you do that? Which prompt will help you take your writing to the next level? And what maybe you haven't thought about even addressing about that topic that the prompt might help you think about. So these prompts, which I'm going to show in a moment, are pretty broad. So you really could take things in a lot of different directions, and I genuinely think you could write about just about anything for just about all of them, which is the way I want you to approach this. I want you to approach this through the opportunity and the interesting engagement and the interesting things that you could say, as opposed to feeling like, I have to write about this thing that I'm just so not interested in. This prompt is just like, so not aligned with what I'm interested in. That should not be really part of the worry. If you think about those topics ahead of time, I think that you'll find a prompt that will help you get in. So here they are. You can take a picture, of course, but you don't have to. They are online. They're available for everyone to see at all times. So that's not a big secret. So for example, I'm going to read the middle one. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? There are like 10 different avenues into that topic. What did you learn? A challenge, a failure, an area of growth. There are so many places you could take that. So if you're thinking about talking about a really impactful volunteer experience, and your friend next to you is also thinking about talking about that really impactful volunteer experience, these prompts are how you write different essays. So I don't need to have you recounting what the volunteer experience was. I need to have you telling me about a time that you maybe had a little bit of a challenging situation at this volunteering opportunity, and how that helped you learn a lesson that you then see showing up in your life on a daily basis. The last one, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? We're doing that type of stuff every single day. So think about a belief or an idea that you held true until you learned some new information. What a great opportunity to write about something interesting for a college essay. And then, as I promised, the last one here, share an essay on a topic of your choice. So there are so many paths into this essay. And so I wonder maybe if some folks came into this presentation thinking, this is going to be really narrow, this is going to be really just, it has to be one specific thing. And now I hope maybe there's a little bit of overwhelm in the sense of, I could write about so many things. Like there's so many things that these admissions folks could read, would want to hear about. And so that is the place that I'd like you to leave here today thinking is, wow, there is so much opportunity. I have so many interesting things I'd like to say, and these prompts will help me kind of get into some of those topics. So as I said, these Common App essay prompts are available. You can look at them at any time. They change them maybe once every 7-8 years, something like that, and they just changed them like 2 years ago. So I have pretty high confidence that this is what will be there on your application whenever it is that you decide to apply. I will say when they changed them from the previous prompts to these prompts, they weren't massively different. They were just like slightly tweaked, and they still had the same share an essay on a topic of your choice. So I think one of the most common questions that I will get asked after I give these presentations or during them is, what does the admission counselor want to read? Like, what do you want to read? And that's a really hard question because I am just me, myself, Carrie from the University of Vermont, and there are thousands of me's all over the United States and around the world, and they have nothing in common with actual me, right? Like they couldn't sell that same slide, that second slide about my interests and things like that. So how could you put the pressure on yourself to write something that the admission counselor wants to read? Our job, our training, our responsibility is to read what you have to say and be interested in it regardless of whether it connects with us personally. There is no element of that happening in our application review. Really what we're thinking about is we want you to be you. I can read an essay and tell when a student was like not into it. I can read an essay and tell when the parent chose the topic, right? Those are easy things to tell when you read a piece of writing. So the idea of just being you, whether that is a little bit quirky, whether that is a little bit off the beaten path of what you think you maybe should be writing about, I support that. I would rather read that than read 25 essays all about scoring the winning goal in a game, right? So there's lots of winning goals because there's lots of games and things like that. But what is it that you learned about yourself when scoring that goal? That's the type of stuff we're talking about here in the college essay. So, as I said, there's lots of different me's, people like me, all over the country and all over the world. So how do we actually review an essay? So the way that it goes at the University of Vermont, I have worked also at another school as well, and it was very similar, is that we're taking a look at all of the pieces of the application to kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with in terms of the academic qualifications. So if a student is very, very academically qualified, that will be primarily all we're taking a look at, and then it will be sort of an automatic admit. If the student is very not academically qualified and it's not going to be a good fit, they don't meet the minimum entrance requirements, there's probably not a whole lot that any other part of the application can do to change that. For example, if you're applying to be a biology major and you haven't taken much science, those things aren't going to add up. They're just not going to work. So what I take a look at really in depth at an essay is when a student is kind of somewhere in the middle. I see some really great things and I see some things that are a little bit maybe not as great, and I want to try to understand more depth into the student. So we have, at the University of Vermont and a lot of other schools, we have an admissions committee process. So I'll take a look at the application, I'll make my initial thoughts, and then if I'm not really sure what to do, it will go to an admissions committee with a lot of people. And so for example, if I have an application that there's some concerns, but some really good stuff, but the essay gave me something to really grab onto, was like, wow, this student would be a great fit at UVM because they wrote their essay about their passion for sustainability, that's where those sorts of things can come up in like advocating for a student in an admissions committee situation. So I'm looking for what kind of gaps can I fill in and what else can I learn? What can I find here that can help me advocate for this student? And I'm also trying to figure out what are the key takeaways? What is it that this student wants me to learn and know about them because of this essay? And I'm also looking for the fact that you put time and attention into your essay. I read many essays that I could clearly tell the student really didn't care. They dashed it off 1 second before the deadline, and that's just discouraging, right? I'm sitting there taking the time to read it. I want to see that the student has taken time to put into that essay to give me a good sense of who they are. So I think this will probably make sense given what I've talked about. It really is less important what you write about, and it's more important how you write it. So I've read really amazing essays about a really great book that a student read, or their favorite coffee shop, or a really massive life experience that they worked through, or a health issue. I've read essays about basically everything. And I've read good essays about almost everything and not so good essays about almost everything. So the key is not the topic. The key is how you do it and how you sort of use that topic to tell me a little bit about yourself. So it is not, as I've said, a story. It's not a stream of consciousness. I want you to think about reflection, analysis, outcomes, learning. And those topics that I showed you, or the prompts, for the Common App, they really kind of guide you towards these things. They are not asking you, tell me about a time you XYZ. They're saying, you probably did XYZ, reflect on that experience. Tell me what you learned. What was the outcome? So we all know our English teachers, right? They sort of remind us and tell us, show, don't tell, that sort of stuff. This is kind of that in a college essay. So I want you to take it one step further. So maybe draft 1 is in your head. I'm thinking about my Humane Society experience. So draft 1 could be me writing as much as I want about how wonderful animals are and how wonderful it is to volunteer with animals and animal welfare and things like that. And then I go back and I read it and I say, well, there's not a whole lot of Carrie in this. This is just, a lot about like rabbits and cats and things like that. So then I take it in another direction and I talk about learning. What did I learn there? The animals don't care who I am. They don't care if I have a master's degree and I read 5,000 essays. They just need care. They just need care in that moment. What did it teach me about being present? What did it teach me about caring for others who maybe don't have the same level of power that I have? That's your essay, right? Because anybody who I volunteer with on my Sunday morning crew could write about Oh yeah, I love taking care of the cats and the animals and the rabbits and things like that. But not everybody is going to learn the same lessons that I do. And so that's where you take your essay from whether your friend's writing about, don't write about that, into this is a unique essay where it is only you who can write this. So we, of course, want to make our English teacher proud. I wouldn't point it out if it wasn't something I had seen in an essay. So you're going to use paragraph breaks. You're going to use proper spelling and grammar. You're going to capitalize I, those sorts of things that we definitely know we need to do. You're also not going to use too much dialogue. I think sometimes when we're in that idea of show, don't tell, we can sometimes go way heavy into dialogue. And if you're using the words of others and you're quoting others throughout the entire essay, your presence isn't as strong in that essay, and so I would encourage you to stay away from too much dialogue. Some dialogue, to get us in the moment, that's fine. But an entire conversation that takes up, 600 of the 650 words wouldn't be where we'd want to go. And I also think it's really important not to use a thesaurus or alternative type tool to change your own words simply because you think you need to sound loftier, smarter, different, whatever, than you actually are. I don't care what a thesaurus thinks. I care what you think. I don't care what your English teacher thinks the better word choice would be here. I care what your word choice would be here. And so maybe I'm going to speak to the parents a little bit here. This might be an opportunity, an exercise for a little bit of hands-off. And that might be hard, and I understand that. But we want our students to be showing up on the first day of college knowing that they were the ones who got themselves there. And so if you were the one that got themselves there and then you're 65 miles away or 650 miles away or whatever, that might be a challenge. And so maybe we're going to face some of these challenges before we actually, get to a college campus. Proofreading, though, important. I would love, students, if you feel comfortable asking your parent to proofread, that could be a great option. If you're like, I don't think that's going to work for me, you could ask someone else. You could ask a teacher. You could ask a counselor. You could ask a friend. So proofreading would definitely be something you'd want to do. So there are some topics, as I said, there really isn't any sort of topic that would be completely off limits. But there are some topics that I would encourage you to find other realms and other places to address. There have certainly been essays that I have read that have been deeply, deeply troubling. I have gotten in touch with school counselors before because I was afraid for student safety. And so I would encourage you to utilize another format for that type of thing outside of your college essay. I hope that you would have a safe adult that you could contact. I put some contact information up here for a couple of national hotlines. Should you feel that that was something you wanted to address, I would encourage you not to address that in your college essay because that's really not a way of getting help in the immediate. And I would want you to get that help in the immediate. So school-specific essays. They're called a lot of different things, optional essay, short answer, things like that. My suggestion to you is if you are given an opportunity to share more about yourself, to share more writing of yours, do it. Don't shy away from, don't, say, ugh, I don't have time for this, I don't want to do this. Always go towards the opportunity, towards the challenge. And so, for example, I think our UVM ones are fun and interesting to write about. You could write about what Ben & Jerry's flavor you would invent. You could write about your relationship to your environment. You could write about the soundtrack to your life. What song would be on that soundtrack? And that one's cool because we actually make a playlist of all the songs that students write about and then send it out. So these are really kind of a way to get to know the school a little bit better and for us to get to know you a little bit better in a less formal way. I would say if we're talking like 10 out of 10 formalness would be like the most important paper you ever wrote in your high school experience. The college essay would be like a 7.5. This might go down towards like a 5, right? A little more casual, maybe a little bit more conversational. Opportunity for us to get to know you, opportunity for us to see the match and the fit to UVM, and the same thing would be true for other colleges. And you don't have to write why UVM in order to show us that you're interested. You could write any of these topics and show us that you're interested in UVM. Okay, so we're going to talk about being ethical. We've all been waiting for the moment where I'm going to talk about AI. So I've been giving this presentation for many, many years for college and career pathways, and every year for the past 3 to 4 years, AI has shown up a little bit more. Like the first year, it was like a joke. I was like, can you imagine? And then 2 years ago, it was like, ooh, AI kind of makes mistakes, like don't do that. And then now we're actually we're in a place where we're talking about ethics, and we're talking about how do we want to show up on a college campus? How do we want to show up in an essay? What kind of a person do we want to be when we have an opportunity in front of us? So first of all, don't even think about plagiarizing. Now, plagiarizing in the way I'm thinking of it is sort of this old school plagiarizing, which would be find an essay online, download it, submit it, or pay someone, they write your essay, submit it. You're a friend, you find their essay on the ground, you pick it up, you submit it. I know no one in this room would do that. There's just really not a place for that, nor a reason to do it. I hope that I have shown you in this presentation that it really is about what you're writing and what you are writing, as opposed to the piece of writing itself. So now we're going to talk about AI. So I'm going to read you this quote because I think this is a smart way of thinking of this. This is from Caltech. If you're still wondering whether your use of AI in crafting your application is ethical, ask yourself whether it would be ethical to have a trusted adult perform the same task you are asking of ChatGPT. Would a teacher be able to review your essay for grammatical and spelling errors? Of course. Would that same teacher write a draft of the essay for you to tweak and then submit? Definitely not. So what is the reason? If you're thinking to yourself, yeah, my parent made me come to this presentation, but I'm just going to use AI. I want you to think about what is the reason for that? Why do you want to use AI? And I came up with some assumptions. These may be true for you, they may not be. Maybe you want to save time and you want to make it easier. This feels like a lot. You're busy. You'd rather be doing something else. You'd rather go with your friends. You'd rather do whatever. You don't think you are quite what it takes, and so you want to be something else. That could be another reason you might use AI. And you might be a little bit concerned about your writing skills, and so you want to appear to be a better writer than you are. I can guarantee you that AI is not a better writer than you. I can guarantee it. Because it's so inauthentic. And like I said, 20 different ways, I want to read your authentic words. So then I want you to think about, how do you want to show up to a college campus? I've already sort of alluded to this. If you think about a parent writing an essay for you, I want you to think about the same way as you think about AI writing an essay for you. You show up on the first day of college, you're in your intro to psych class, the professor has a policy of no computers, so you have literally a pen and a paper. In that moment, how do you want to feel? Do you want to feel ready? Do you want to feel confident? Do you want to know that you, yourself, your words, your sort of being is who's meant to be there? Or do you want to hold your pen to that paper and be like, what would ChatGPT write right now? Uh-oh, I don't know how to do this. You do know how to do it, but you don't want those ideas in your brain about whether or not these are your actual words. So I would say you would want to show up to a college or university feeling prepared, feeling ready, feeling confident, feeling authentic, feeling like you were the one, and ready to learn and be challenged. Now, if you want to save time and make it easier by not actually writing an essay, you're not really going to show up on college campus to be ready to be challenged and ready to learn, in my opinion. So you can start, I'm speaking to the students here, you can start to make some really adult decisions for yourself about how you want to go about this process. I think there's an ethical way to do it, and I think there's an unethical way to do it. But you're an adult, you get to make those decisions. As we know, there is no 100% foolproof way for me, little me who has to read thousands of essays, to tell whether or not you used AI. So it's ethics, and it's authenticity, and it's you asking yourself these questions, like, how do I want to show up? And I hope that you can take away from my presentation, for the most part, in my experience, at the places I've worked, the essay will not make or break. The things that we're looking at are more holistic, all around. How does it all fit together? So if you're thinking, well, everything else is lost, and so I must nail this essay, that's probably not the right way of thinking. And so thinking, okay, AI is going to save me, I would caution you against that. That would be my suggestion to you. But you get to make your own decisions. And you can absolutely look to see what AI policies exist at the colleges you're applying to. And you might get your acceptance taken away if they find out that you use AI. And you might be really up a creek if that happens. So I would caution you to just let that go out of your mind and see it as an opportunity instead of a burden. Because in my opinion, AI is taking the opportunity away from yourself and giving it to something else. And I think that you all know that you don't want to do that. You don't actually want to do that. So I would encourage you now, you're starting early, give yourself that opportunity to show off who you actually are. So my final thoughts before we get to questions. I want you to be yourself and I want you to be ethical. You get to define what those things mean. I've given you some suggestions, some things to think about, but I do want you to be authentic and I want you to be ethical. I want you to showcase your writing skills. That's really important. That's going to be a big part of this. But I will say, of my office mates, I'm the only one who has an English degree, right? So I'm not looking at like a grand assessment of whether or not you're using every grammatical concept that you've ever learned. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, being aware of your reader, trying to take time, trying to do your best, that sort of thing. We want to think about focusing on growth, learning, outcomes, and or analysis. So taking it that step further. It's kind of that, that show, don't tell. And if all your friends could write the exact same essay, I want you to think about writing something else because you have way more to say than just the same thing that 17 other people are going to say. And so I want you to think about the ways that you can take your essay to the next level by really going inside to think about what actually means something to you. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I would be glad to take questions. If you do have a question, just wait for the mic to come to you so that the folks online can hear. And you can ask about anything related to the college essay, or you can ask about anything else. I would also be happy to take questions for that.
Here you go. Thanks. Is the information in the college application confidential?
Yes, it is. So there is a part of the application at the very end, like a FERPA declaration that you sign about whether or not information can be released, whether your letter of recommendation can be released back to you, things like that. So when I have reached out to counselors about things that I have read that I'm concerned about, I have indicated, I'm reading this essay, I encourage you to check in, something like that, not sharing specific information.
And I mean confidential just to your office or the institution? Meaning, if this student is admitted, would this information be shared with other offices for academic or other purposes?
That's a great question. No, directly no. So we have ways at UVM of sharing what we would call like a flag. So like, this person has a special inclination towards the arts, let's say. And so I would, check a box and then we could send a list of students who have an inclination to the arts. But no, it would be never shared with an academic unit. It would never be shared with another office on campus or support service or something like that. It is not confidential in our office. I mean, we have confidentiality standards in our office of like, we're not looking at applications that we don't have a reason to look at. So like if my neighbor was applying, I'm not going and looking at my neighbor's application. But anyone could see it at any time if they're in the admissions committee or something like that. Does that sort of answer your question? Great. I'm not seeing any questions. No questions online? Okay, I want to be respectful of your time. I will be here, and I would happily answer any individual questions that you have. But I hope that you had a really great college and career pathways experience. I wish you a lot of luck, and I'll be excited to see the great things you go on to do. So thank you, everyone, for joining me.